Welcome to week 4. We are halfway through the semester, which is amazing. By now you've chosen your brand, you understand the customer, you know who to target and what you claim to stand for. And this week we're going to go deeper into the actual product and brand decisions that make that positioning feel real or hollow. And let's start with a question that sounds simple, but isn't necessarily. What is Starbucks selling? Now, if you said coffee, you're not wrong, but you're not seeing the whole picture either. And the difference between those two answers is the difference between a transactional business and a brand. So chapter 8 gives us this framework, and it's called the 3 levels of a product. Every product, physical or digital, a good or a service, has all 3 of these layers. And understanding all 3 is what separates a marketer from a product manager. The innermost level is that core value, the core customer value. This is what the buyer is really seeking. Not the thing, but the need the thing satisfies. For Starbucks, the core value is not caffeine, it is something more nuanced. A moment of transition in the day, a ritual that signals you're taking care of yourself, a place that feels consistent or familiar no matter what city you're in. Sometimes it is a social identity, the signal that your coffee cup sends to others about yourself. The actual product is the coffee, the cup, the menu, the pricing. This is what you hand over money for in the direct sense. The augmented product is everything wrapped around it. So the store playlist, the carefully curated changes that happen seasonally, the app that remembers your orders, the barista who writes your name on the cup, the rewards program that turns that transaction into a relationship, the free Wi-Fi in the store that turns it into that third place between a home and office. And here's why this matters for your brand analysis. Howard Schultz, who built Starbucks, has said that the company nearly lost its soul when it started optimizing the actual product at the expense of the augmented product. So faster machines that made better espresso but removed the theater of the pour, drive-thrus that eliminated the store experience, mobile ordering that turned what was a personal interaction into a pickup counter. Starbucks is currently running a Back to Starbucks campaign because they recognized that stripping all of those things out of the augmented product really stripped out the core customer value. The drink was fine. The reason to choose Starbucks over anyone else got pretty blurry. So when you think this week about your brand audit, that is the question that I want you to bring to it. Does the augmented product, all the things wrapped around the core offering, actually deliver the core customer value the brand promises? The gap or alignment on that is what you are looking for. Chapter 8 gives us a definition of brand equity. It states that it is the differential effect that knowing the brand name has on the customer response to the product and its marketing. So think about that carefully. It's not really about quality or price. It's about what the name alone does to the customer's perception and response. A Starbucks coffee and a coffee from a generic machine might taste similar, but the experience of buying, holding, being seen with one versus the other is completely different. And that is the difference in brand equity. So the Young and Rubicam Brand Asset Valuator breaks down brand equity into 4 dimensions. First, there is differentiation. Does the brand stand out from the competition? Secondly, there's relevance. Does it actually fit what customers need right now? The next is knowledge. How familiar are consumers with what the brand represents? And lastly, esteem. How highly do they regard it? So a brand can have high knowledge and low esteem, which usually means a brand that was once great and is coasting on its reputation. Or high differentiation and low relevance, which means it's a niche brand that hasn't crossed over into a more mainstream awareness. So brand development is where these strategic decisions get interesting. Chapter 8 gives us 4 options. Line extensions. We use the same brand name on new versions of the same product. We talked about this in week 3 with Tide, the very versions, Tide Simple, Tide Pure Clean. Brand extension. So you take an established name into a completely different category. Virgin Airlines, Virgin Mobile, Virgin Galactic. I think they also even have hotels. Same brand, but very different products. Then you have multi-branding. So that's where you run multiple separate brands in the same category rather than stretching out one name. And then you have new brands. So when an existing name does not fit and would actually hurt the new product. So each of these strategies carries different risks and different opportunities. For your brand audit this week, I want you to think about which development strategy your brand has been using and whether it is serving or diluting the brand equity they have built. All right, so chapter 9 gives us the product life cycle. And I want to use Samsung because it is a concrete story that covers almost every stage in a single company's history. In the early 1990s, Samsung was making inexpensive consumer electronics that were widely considered pretty inferior copies of Japanese brands, like especially Sony. They were in a late introduction to early growth stage in the premium market with low brand esteem and a price-based value proposition. So nobody was choosing Samsung because it was great. They were choosing it because it was cheaper. So the company made a deliberate strategic decision to change that. They hired elite designers, created what they called a wow test, meaning every product had to deliver a moment of genuine surprise to pass internal review. And they began investing heavily in research and development and brand building. By the early 2000s, they had overtaken Sony in multiple categories. Classic growth stage behavior, market acceptance accelerating, profits climbing, brand equity building. So by 2010, in that range, Samsung was in a maturity in the premium smartphone category, going head to head with Apple. So margins were under pressure. The competitive dynamic shifted from expansion to defense. Classic maturity stage, high competition, feature wars, marketing expenditures rising to defend that share of the market. Now, moving forward to present time, Samsung is attempting something pretty interesting. They're positioning their Galaxy and couple series that have AI capabilities and a sustainability narrative. They're trying to create a second growth curve rather than manage a decline. So whether that works is genuinely uncertain, but the strategy is textbook. Use innovation to restart the growth engine before the decline stage takes hold. And here is a nuance from chapter 9 that will matter for your assignment this week. So the PLC, or the product life cycle, applies differently at 3 levels: the product class, the product form, and the brand. Smartphones as a category are in maturity. The AI smartphone as a form is arguably more in the introduction or early growth. Samsung as a brand has its own position in that cycle. These 3 are not the same, and your analysis needs to be specific about which level you are diagnosing. So when chapter 9 walks us through the 8-stage new product development process, I want to really zoom in on the way that this edition handles AI, because it really clarifies how AI is really useful in the process and where it's not useful. So the honest answer, which the textbook gives us and which I think is worth understanding clearly, is that AI is extraordinarily powerful at certain stages and genuinely inadequate at others. So at the idea generation stage, AI can process enormous amounts of customer feedback, social listening data, patent filings, competitive intelligence to surface patterns that human researchers would miss, or it would just be so time intensive to actually find that data. So Samsung's innovation teams, they're using that kind of data. Then at concept development and testing, AI can simulate consumer reactions to new product concepts using synthetic panels built from behavioral data, which drastically reduces the cost and time of a traditional focus group. So at product development itself, AI-powered generative design tools can produce thousands of design variations and test them against specific criteria way faster than a human design team could do. But here is where it starts to break down. At idea screening, someone has to decide which ideas are worth pursuing, given the company's value and that strategic direction. So that is a judgment call. At marketing strategy development, someone has to decide what new product means to the customer and how to position it. At business analysis and commercialization, the human understanding of risk, timing, and organizational capacity, it's irreplaceable. So the pattern you'll see across this course is consistent. AI handles scale, pattern recognition, data. Humans need to handle the judgment, the meaning, and the ethics. That is the best process to use when thinking through the different stages of being a marketer. All right, so week 4, you have 2 chapters this week. Chapter 8, which is on products, services, brands, and chapter 9, which is on that new product development and that product life cycle. Both matter for your assignments. And once again, on these longer periods of reading, learn how to really skim and read for comprehension and detail. A lot of the graphs and pullouts are things that can add to the main concepts, but getting down those main concepts is important. Look forward to seeing you in class.